Welcome back. So, I've been wanting to talk to you guys about this topic for a while, and it kind of recently just came across my mind this morning. Because as I was laying in my bed, I'm like, wow, it's been a long time. Wow, it's been a long time since I had a spanking. And so I felt like I got a craving. Like I got a deep-seated craving to be spanked. And I'm going to get into this topic. I'm going to go very deep, as I always do. And as I thought about making a video on this topic today, I'm like, wow, it's been a while since I talked about BDSM spankings. It's been actually a couple years since I talked about it. Last time I think I made a video on BDSM spankings was way back in LA. It seems like so long ago. I know it was a couple years ago. Probably like around 2017. And I started to reminisce this morning as I lay in my bed when I woke up this morning. I'm like, wow, it's been a long time since I had a good spanking. Oh my gosh, you guys, it's been a long time and I'm craving it. But this is the thing with BDSM spankings, like, you gotta take precaution. You have to be very careful because it is a very sensual, very private, very sacred experience. For me, that's how I see it, you know? And especially it goes along the line with sex too, but it's deeper than sex though. It's psychological, it's spiritual, it's emotional, and you just cannot do it with anybody. Most people don't even understand the dynamics involved when it comes to BDSM. So I'm going to talk about that here in this video. So for starters, BDSM stands for bondage, discipline, sadomasochism. And it basically is an alternative lifestyle for me, right? But it also involves a set of erotic practices that are, you know, practiced or performed by mutually consenting adults. So I have to make that very clear because I think some things, some terms I'm going to talk about here in this video can be misconstrued and a lot of things can be misinterpreted. So I want to make that clear that this lifestyle and these behaviors and activities are practiced between mutually consenting adults or amongst mutually consenting adults. Now, I first discovered BDSM back in 2014 when I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. I lived in Atlanta for like 3 years before I moved to New York City in 2015. Wait, rewind. I moved to New York City in 2014. So I moved to New York City in 2014, but right before I moved, I actually had stumbled across this new lifestyle, BDSM. And it was before I had any exposure to the whole 50 Shades of Grey series, right? Like, I haven't even read the book. I have actually, when I was in LA, which was my past 4 years and I was out there, I actually got a chance to go to a few of the movie premieres. So I was really excited when I got invited to go to, I think it was 50 Shades Darker movie premiere, you guys. And I did, of course, I went live. I made a video on it, so you guys can go check that out. But that was a wonderful experience. I got a chance to meet the cast, directors, producer, all of that for 50 Shades of Grey. And it was wonderful. I felt like, okay, I needed to be there. Like, out of all the people, I needed to be there. But when I discovered BDSM, it was before I saw the movie, and I never read any of the books. And I think what drew me to this lifestyle was a dynamic. I think I actually came across a video where I saw a woman in bondage by a man, her master, And it was something about it that just turned me on. I'm just like, ugh. And you guys, bear with me, okay? Because I know it's going to take some time for me to kind of really get into it. Because, listen, I'm talking about something that is very near and dear to my heart, you guys. This isn't just like a topic that is distant from myself, distant from me. Like, I am very much like this thing really affects me. I'm very much ingrained in this, and I do have experience in this lifestyle. So sometimes it can be difficult for me to kind of really get the wheels rolling, but once I get into it, I get into it. So I saw that video back in 2014. I was just like, man, I felt like I could identify with the woman in the video because she was in bondage and she was being spanked, or rather beaten. Let's say beaten, right? Because beaten is a little bit more intense than a spanking by her master. And I just felt a connection to them. Just like, I wanted to try that, right? And so the universe made it so that I was able to meet my master / mentor at the time. The universe kind of just brought us together. And it was like my life changed at that moment when I met this guy. My life changed because he was a master, very experienced in BDSM. I did not have any experience with BDSM. I think I always had fantasized about like what it's like to be kind of tied up, chained up, but I never experienced it. And granted, my master at the time, we never had sex. So that's what made the experience that much more mystical, given that I could see how the dynamic played out, right? Being a more psychological dynamic, how he was able to kind of tap into my psyche in ways. And when you can tap into a person's psyche, like you can really touch their body just by touching their psyche. And this guy was like 6'5", he was tall, like he just had a stance, he had a presence about him, you guys. Excuse me for the noise, that's my heater. You guys know how New York City heaters work, right? It's gas operated, so that's what you guys hear. If you hear any streaming noise or liquid. So it was interesting though, like our connection initially, because he just knew everything to say. Like, you ever met a guy or person just knew everything right to say, right? And I was just wowed by the experience, because I'm just like, wow, it's amazing how like you can want something to happen and then the universe orchestrates it so that it happens, right? This person comes into your life and you get a chance to experience it. So that's kind of what happened, and I was very grateful that the way it played out. So, of course, like, we, talked on the phone. We were vibing. And the way, it was a communication, the way he communicated with me was, like, it's like he knew me. It's like the universe sent him for me, right? He was dominant. Of course, I identify myself as a submissive. And so with that, and I'm laying the foundation here before I get to talk about BDSM Spankings, I think that's very important. So he has set the ground rules, of course with my consent, but he kind of laid out the foundation. And this, I think, this is what sets a real dom, because you got a lot of fake doms out there, people claiming to be dom, but they're really not dominant. But what really set him apart, and I knew that he was real, because he played it so sweet and so smart, and he was a very sensual, caring dom. He was a master. Like, he wore that title appropriately. He definitely was a master at his craft. And setting the rules, right? Because I'm going to share with you guys some of the rules that he set. So, he had like a curfew for me where I had to be in bed at a certain time. When I woke up in the morning, I had to check in. So I had like 3 check-in times with him. He set the frame. He set the structure, right? which it goes over a lot of people's head. I know a lot of things I'm going to talk about here in this video. A lot of vanilla people who we identify as just people who don't practice BDSM, regular people, right? But we call them vanilla. Y'all ain't gonna know what the hell I'm saying. It may sound very foreign to you guys, but I think that a lot of things that we practice in BDSM, you guys also practice in your vanilla relationships. So, you know, with the curfew, having to be in bed at a certain time, having to check in 3 times a day, he chose what I ate, which, like I said, this is all mutually consenting. It's not like, oh, he was controlling me, which he was, but not in a negative way, right? Not in non-consenting way, how you may see in, you know, abusive relationships. So that's the distinguishing factor here, because this is what I wanted, this is what I desired, this is what I needed. And I think that's what it was. It's amazing how something so minute that we think is minor, it's very small, can make a huge difference in a relationship. So just the curfew, the check-in times, him choosing what I ate, that alone, those 3 things alone set the precedent for the relationship. It kind of set the dynamic, the tone. And it made it that much more easier to submit because it communicated that he cared. And beyond that, he made sure he followed up, because you got some fake dumbs out there, right? They may try to say, oh, you got to do this, right? I want you to do this. But they don't follow through with it. He was very on top of things. So if I didn't check in, like, he would catch me, like, a minute later, 2 minutes later, right? And ask me, you know, what's going on? Why haven't you checked in? And make sure that there are consequences to follow. And the wow thing about this is that discipline, because I'm a submissive that I like discipline. I like spankings, clearly. BDSM spankings. But he had communication around it, right? So that's also a distinguishing factor, is that he talked to me about the discipline that he was going to give me before he gave it to me. It's not like he just came out of nowhere and just smacked me, right? Which you see in, like, abusive relationships. And I have to give a kind of precautionary warning to say that, yes, you got to be careful in these kinds of relationships, because there's a fine line between abuse and dominance. And it's important that everyone involved knows the difference. So what I noticed, because I was involved in a similar relationship after the relationship I had with my mentor, where it was a full-blown relationship. It was 3 years long. That was actually my last relationship that I was in, with the guy that I met in New York City. This is after I had left Atlanta, moved to New York in 2014. And I met this guy who was former military, Jamaican, and we clicked. Like, day one we clicked. It was like our souls were meant to be together, kind of click, right? Because he got it. Like, he was dominant. I know dominant men, right? And I think dominant men, especially in our society nowadays, it's kind of just hard to come by. Real dominant men, it's hard to come by. But his flaws, because everybody got their flaws, right? I think the issue there, and the reason why we're not together now, is because, you know, he had an alcohol problem. So even throughout the relationship, though, there was a dynamic where, of course, I gave him power. And that's the beauty, I think, in dominant, submissive relationships, is because I think that sometimes dominant men think that they have all the power, right? I think it's really abusive men. I won't say dominant, because dominant men know who holds the power. They know that the submissive is the one who truly holds the power. But I would say abusive men think that they are the one that have the power, not knowing that it's a submissive, the woman who submits to them, who yields her power to him. And at any time, she can take it back. She can take it away, right? Because that's just the way our society is set up. Women are empowered in our American society. The law is actually in favor of women, believe it or not, right? When there's a domestic dispute, the law typically is in favor of the woman being the less powerful force in that relationship physically, right? So it makes sense. And so with my ex, the Jamaican guy, like, he had this alcohol problem where, you know, I think a lot of the dominance, the so-called discipline would come from the alcohol, which is not healthy. So I have to make a distinction between, you know, when a dom is giving out discipline to his submissive, when he has a stable mind. Like, that's when it should take place. He should be at a calm state. He may be upset, but his emotions are regulated, right? He's not dysregulating his emotions where he's just all over the place and he's reacting and snapping and becoming physically aggressive. Because that's important to note. And unfortunately, I did experience that in my last relationship. That's like I say, it's a fine line. It's a very fine line between dominance and abuse. And he would, you know, he in his mind would discipline me out of anger and out of frustration while he was intoxicated. So things got ugly. I'm not going to really go into detail here in this video. I have talked about it before, but it got ugly. And I will give an example. I'll give an example of a situation that happened when we were living in New York City. This is before we moved to Los Angeles, when I moved to Los Angeles in 2016, where, okay, before I go into this scenario, I am going to talk about how, yes, with my ex, we were able to engage in BDSM activities, right? BDSM related activities. And granted, BDSM is something that I introduced to him. I don't think he really knew much about BDSM, but I think for him, dominance kind of just came natural because, you know, Jamaican men are just naturally dominant, right? So, just African men, I think, in general. And so I did come to him. I remember we were living together in the Bronx, in Little Italy in the Bronx, and I did. You know, I would say to him, I want to be spanked. Like, I want you to spank me. I remember him saying, like, oh, you want him spanking? And that dynamic that we had, like, it was beautiful because, like I said, I was a baby girl. And maybe I need to go a little bit more in depth in what a baby girl is and a dom is, right? So a baby girl is a woman. I don't want you guys to misinterpret, because this is where the misinterpretation can come in, just based on the terminology, because YouTube does not recognize baby girl as an adult woman. You know, they will flag a video if they think that if you use baby girl in the title, and they're like, wait a minute, this is some molestation or pedophile kind of shit. No, I have no interest in pedophilia, okay, at all. So when I speak of baby girl, I'm talking about adult woman. I'm an adult woman. I'm 37 years old. Within baby girl, there are many different developmental states. So a baby girl can identify as a little toddler, like 9 months old. That's where you see women with baby bottles and bibs, you know, the little barrettes in their hair and pacifiers. They look like little babies, little infants. You have little toddlers, you have baby girls like 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, just different age groups, 12 years old. I would say I identify myself as a baby girl who is probably somewhere between 12 to 16 when that state comes out. Because this is the thing. I consider myself to be a switch. And I know traditionally within BDSM, switch has been known to, or people look at switch as switching between submissive and dom, right? So basically switching between different power, between the power dynamic of a submissive and a dom. That's how people usually interpret switch. But for me, I don't necessarily switch between being a sub and being a dom. For me, it's more like an age switch. So there are times, and this is in relation to me relating to a man, right? Being involved in a serious relationship with a man who I love and care about. There are times where I will present as like a 12 to 16-year-old. And granted, this video and conversation is for mature adults only. So if you're not mature and you can't handle this kind of discussion, exit stage left, okay? So yeah, there are times where I identify like a 12-year-old, 16-year-old, and I talk in my little baby voice, and I want to be treated like such, right? And then there are times when I'm like I am now, talking to you guys as a mature 37-year-old woman. But the switch can happen, can be triggered by many different things. And so, me and my past relationship as a baby girl, there were times, I would relate to my ex that way. And his name was Kenneth, but I will call him Kenny. And he would, I think some men get it, though. This is the thing about dominant men. Some men get it. Some men know, and they understand the dynamic that just women just like to be taken care of. We like to be nurtured like little girls, because there's a little girl, I think, in all of us, but some of us kind of suppress the little girl inside, and I don't. I let her live. I let her be when I'm dating in a relationship with a guy. As long as, of course, trust is established, because there has to be a certain degree of trust with this kind of dynamic. And so I, would go in my mental developmental state of a teenager around him, and ask him I want to be spanked. He's like, oh, you want to spank it? I was like, yeah. Yes, daddy, I want to spank it. And you guys got to go back and watch my video I made on intimate relationship or intimate moments with my dad, my biological father, so you guys do not get things misinterpreted, because I'm just going to say this really quickly. I know some of you guys may look at this as, oh, she got daddy issues. No. Go back and watch that video. I talk about all of that and how me and my father, we have a healthy relationship. We're cool. My dad is still in my life. My dad raised me. I think this dynamic is just something that I am interested in. This is what makes me happy. Different things make people happy, and this is what makes me happy. I think it's important that we all know what turns us on, and I found it. I found it back in 2014. This is it. It was more solidified. I think I always had an idea of what turned me on, but to really come to terms with it and be able to experience what I did with my master/mentor back in 2014 when I was in Atlanta, I was like, okay, this is it. This is the dynamic. This is it. This is what I want in a relationship. And so when I remember asking my ex Kenny to give me a spanking, he was for it. He was for the shits, right? He was for it, yo. He did not hesitate. He was like, all right. And so of course I disrobe and I lie down on the bed, butt ass naked, and he gave me well, it was beyond a spanking. It was a beating. Because that's how I think initially he would start off as a spanking, right? So little taps with his belt. I'm just harder. And I think, yes, if you guys really have an urge, right, to really want to know, okay, well, damn, why is she doing why? Where did she get this from, right? Where does it come from? Okay. I wouldn't say it comes from my dad. I would say it comes from my mom, because growing up, I did get beatings. I'm talking about, I call them slave beatings from my mother, where, I had to disrobe, take off all your clothes, lay down on the bed, and got beat with an extension cord, cable cord, leather belt. Those were her 3 choice weapons. And at that time, I hated it. I dreaded it. What's up, Yanga? How are you? I hated it at that time. I was like, I hated her. But then I think over time I came to come to terms with it, right? And I think someone said this on my video. It's just that was your way, practicing BDSM is kind of your way of resolving that childhood trauma. And I was, okay, all right. I agree, okay? But I think beyond that, I think, shit, I don't look at it as a bad thing. This is what I'm going to do, and it's not something that I feel can be fixed, or I want to fix for that matter. So, yeah, I remember that day where I was like, you know, we were at home in the Bronx, and I was laying across the bed, and yo, that shit felt so good. It was like harder. And when I say yo, he was like coming down with that belt. And most men don't feel comfortable doing that. And it makes sense, right? It makes sense. Most men just don't feel comfortable doing that because they're like, no, this is abuse. I don't want to do this. But listen, this is the reason why there is a safe and a sacred space for people who practice BDSM. There are websites, there are social networks. One of the most popular ones is FetLife, where we get each other, you know, and it's perfectly legal. It's between consenting adults. And you say, what? I'm good. You just have a running nose? You have a running nose. Get some ginger. I love me some ginger. I'll be telling my mom, listen, drink some ginger, woman. She's like, I don't like that stuff. It's nasty. Drink you some ginger. Ginger fixes everything. And black seed oil, too. I don't like the taste of black seed oil, but I will pop me some pills. I got the pill form of the black seed oil. And yes. So that's how I stay healthy. And I'm living out here in New York City when it's freaking freezing cold, being out there in the cold with no gloves on, like I don't even wear a scarf, but I just make sure I take care of myself. And so, yeah, it just felt so good. I'm just like, I get it. A lot of guys are like, nah, I don't feel comfortable doing this, and they won't, so they won't do it because they just, society has said that it's abuse and it's wrong. But yeah, so like he did it. I remember that day. He gave it to my ass, yo. And then I think he was really into it too, like really into it more than I was, because I was like, stop, and he kept going, right? And so that's the reason why I think BDSM couples have a safe word, because stop just doesn't cut it, right? Oh, you welcome, Yanga. Hugs and kisses. So stop just does not cut it, because I think a lot of times, guys interpret stop like, oh, she wanted to keep going, right? And when I was saying stop, he did not respect the word stop. He kept going. I was like, all right, I had to like really put emphasis on like, stop, like it's hurting, like I can't take anymore, right? So I know my limit, and when I got to that point, I was just like, my body was limp, and I was just like, it felt so good, you guys. And so on FetLife, I don't really like FetLife, granted. I like FetLife because I feel like it's just a lot of people on there like sharing like naked pictures. I don't like that part. I don't like people sending me naked pictures of themselves. I don't know you. I like conversation. I like things like this, what we're doing, like having a conversation about these kinds of topics, right, and activities. I just don't. The pictures is like, y'all can keep that shit. But one thing I did notice, like on FetLife, is that submissives, which can be a man or a woman, because there's gender fluidity and there's fluidity in sexuality preferences, and so people like submissives would get on there and they would show pictures of their bruises and brag about it, like, oh, the darker the bruise or the bigger the bruise, the better, right? And the comments, people would just like be admiring their bruises. So it's a different lifestyle. It's alternative. That's why it's alternative. So that's why when I describe BDSM, I describe it as an alternative lifestyle, because it is. It's different than the norm. And so that was that experience, right? So that was a good expression of BDSM spankings and that whole dynamic. But I did want to give a situation where, shit got ugly between me and him numerous times, actually. Where I think in his mind, like, he just could not separate. Like, he could not regulate himself because he drank alcohol, as do a lot of Jamaicans, especially from Brooklyn. And I don't remember if he was under the influence of alcohol that day, but this was when we were in the Bronx, still before we had moved to LA. And like, I don't even know what precipitated this shit. But like, all I remember was like out of nowhere. Like, we were in the bedroom and he like jumped on me and started choking me. And granted, I'm one of those submissives. I don't like choking. Okay, spanking, yes. Okay, or beatings, yes. But choking, no. I do like bondage too, but choking, that is a no for me. No. And he started choking me and smothering my freaking face. Like, he covered my my nose and my mouth with his hand, and I'm like just squirming, trying to get from under him, and I'm just like, stop, I'm screaming. And yes, NYPD was called. I didn't call them, the neighbors did, and he was so disappointed. He was just like, you called? I'm like, how the fuck I called? You was on top of me the whole time. I'm trying to fight for my goddamn life. How the hell I'm gonna call? But it was the neighbors that called because they heard me screaming, and then they get there. And this is the thing about NYPD, because NYPD really don't take domestic violence seriously, unfortunately. So they came in, the little entourage came in, knocked on the door. Let me make sure the thing about this, I love this dress, but the buttons. You gotta be careful with the buttons, because them bitches be coming loose. So they came in, right? NYPD came in, and I just feel like they disregarded the whole situation. They're just like, oh, nice TV. And granted, the place was nice, right? I remember when I first met him, he first invited me to his place before I moved in. I kind of moved in like damn near the same day we met. When I said the relationship progressed very quickly, it did. Like, it was intense. And so they commended him on his big screen TV. And I'm like, I'm sitting here fighting for my goddamn life. Like, I thought I was about to freaking die. And then they came to me and got the report after they commended his big screen TV. But who knows? That could have been a psychological tactic they were using to try to align themselves with him so that whatever, right? But I just find it to be interesting because he does have that way about him, given he's ex-military. So he know how to talk and relate to officials or whatever, paramilitary. And so they talking to me, and of course, typical of most abuse victims, say, no, I want to press charges. That's what I did. No, I don't want anything. I don't want you guys to do anything. They asked, what do you want us to do? Nothing. Okay? Because there's a lot involved. I'm not going to go into detail in all of that, right? But I think a lot of people can understand, like, you know, it sounds easy, but it's not that easy in terms of fixing a situation. And so they took him around the block. I took him around the block, and they, you know, talked to him about the situation. They brought him back, and they asked us, were we good? I'm like, good, you know, because, I mean, deep down inside, of course, you don't really want to separate, right? You just want the person to stop doing what they're doing. But the lines got blurred, and that's what I want to talk about here in this video. The lines kind of got blurred. So it was like, in his mind, I was his, and I gave him that power, but at the same time, he did not have enough regulation of his self, right, his emotions, to separate the two and to know when enough was enough, right, and what he should not do. And so it came a point where at the end of 2015, I had finished my master's degree in New York, and I made a decision. I actually was going to go to London. This is crazy. I was going to go to London, you guys. I was supposed to be in London working on my PhD, but I decided to go to LA. The idea was just to get far away as I could from that situation. So I booked the flight, unbeknownst to him, and I dipped. He caught up with me. Long story short, he followed me out to LA. We rekindled, whatever, fixed the situation. It really wasn't fixed, right? Nothing really is fixed. No matter where you go to a different part of the world, it's still going to be there, right? So that's basically what happened. And it was weird. So I say that to say that, yes, you got to use precaution. I think that's also the reason why I have not I've been very careful in terms of dating and in terms of involving myself in these kinds of alternative practices, because it requires someone who is very mature. And I think back to my first BDSM master, right? I think back to the person who first introduced me to this, right? Who showed me what it was really like back in Atlanta. And I'm just like, that's very rare. That is rare to find someone who is mature about it and who has the discipline. Because to be a dominant man and you have someone else's life, right, in your hands, an adult, you know, like, it takes maturity, it takes responsibility, it takes discipline on your part. Some men just don't have it. They don't. And granted, I speak very highly of my master at the time, my former master, mentor. And you guys can go to my website and check that out, because as part of my experience and learning what it was like to be a submissive, he had me keep a journal. So my book, Dying to Submit, is part autobiographical and part fiction. I made it fiction. And I made it fiction for kind of obvious reasons. But a good portion of it is actually true. Where he had me keep, a journal of my experiences. He wanted to see, like, what my mind was. I think because at the time it was difficult for me to talk about it. So it was like, all right, you can write about it. He knew I was a writer. So it was like, all right, just write about it, and then I'll read it day to day. So I just kept a journal, and I ended up turning the journal, it was like an online blog, basically, into a book, Dying to Submit. Now, I almost forgot about this, you guys, because if you've read the story, which I have posted the excerpt on my website, danielleleash.com, this is actually the red box. Like, it's funny because I had this in storage for many years. After I moved to Atlanta, I got a storage unit in New York, and it's been sitting there while I was out in LA working on my PhD. And this was in there in storage, and I got my stuff out of storage when I moved back to New York City last year from LA. And I'm looking at this box like, wow, I remember this natural soy wax candle with the scent of white winter floral. I'm like, wow, you guys, oh my gosh, this is crazy, but this is the box. This is the box, but when I talked about the box in my story, I actually, I fictionalized the box. So, the way the box was given to me in real life was much different than the way it's presented in my story. But I want to talk about a little bit more about this my idea of BDSM spankings, right? My perspective on it, and basically, I think why I like BDSM spankings. I mean, I already kind of laid the foundation, right? The groundwork in terms of talking about my childhood experiences with my mom growing up and how she disciplined me. So I think that plays a significant role in it. But I think also biologically or neurologically speaking, I think that obviously when we experience pain, like there are certain neurochemicals that are released in our brain throughout our body that help ease the pain, to dissipate the pain. And so I think that's what it is, because just like, basically just like, what's activated when a person does drugs or when a person eats candy, right? Like the pleasure center in our brain, the pain pleasure was more pleasure center, right? In our brain that's activated when we experience things that are pleasurable. It's the same thing, I think, for BDSM spankings, except for there's the pain and pleasure aspect of it, right? So for me, I like the pain and pleasure aspect. Like for me, it's just, it's really hard to put into words. And I think even beyond the physical sensation of what I experience, I think for me it's more psychological. because I definitely will not allow that activity to happen just with anybody. I haven't done it. That's the thing. That's why I crave it now. I made a video. I'm thinking about this morning when I thought about making a video today. I'm just like, it's been so long and I crave it. Oh my gosh. But I think I also, even deeper than that, I think I crave a relationship with that dynamic. But it's rare and it's really hard to find, even when trying to explain it or communicate it with people. Like, look at you guys. You guys disappeared. People just don't get it. Which is fine. I'm thankful that here, when I made this video on Facebook, that you guys did listen for some time and then you just left, right? As opposed to what I'm pretty sure is going to happen on YouTube. YouTube is just a different kind of audience. So there, for the most part, I think people are very supportive and understanding. But then you always got the knuckleheads that got to come and leave very insensitive, ignorant comments because they're commenting on something they don't quite understand. They're looking at it through a different kind of lens that doesn't consider many different perspectives. So, yes, I haven't engaged in that kind of dynamic. I've been very careful on purpose. I've been single since December 2017. I've dated, and I've had fun on dates, and kiss guys and things like that. But in terms of really getting deeply involved with someone, I'm careful, and I think it also goes back just to my preference and to my level of attraction. Like, for me, that dynamic has to be present. The dominant, submissive dynamic. That's just me. And it's funny, and talking about being healed or cured, people be trying to cure me. I'm like, listen, I'm fine. I accept myself for who I am. I don't cause any problems to anyone. So, I'm fine. But the funny thing is that, my psychologist back in LA, as part of our PhD program, we have to, go to therapy and get therapy through a licensed psychologist. And so I had one there I was seeing back in LA, actually in Beverly Hills. This lady was funny. Like, I liked her though. Honestly, I think she also was part of the reason why I kind of developed and got more in tune with my African identity with respect to the way I dress. Because she sent me this video of a TED Talk, and the woman was, I think, just talking about how it's important that you emit the identity, the person that you are on the inside, right? You let that person show on the outside, right? You hold yourself with dignity, right, and respect. Like, it's okay to dress in that way, right? And for me, I think that was like planting a seed. When I saw that video and I talked about it with her, and she really instilled that in me. She was just like, like just dress elegantly, right? Because for me, I think at the time, like prior, I was always been a plain Jane. So fashion really wasn't my thing. But then like that experience in therapy was just like an awakening. It was just like, oh. And then I think from there, that's when I got an idea. I came across this shop in the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall in South Central, and I saw like this. I saw the African attire, and I got 2 shirts, and I liked it. And when I wore it, I got compliments. And ever since then, like I've been buying like more and more like African garb. I got the African skirts, and I would get so many compliments. And until this day, I continue to buy African garb and I get compliments. But that just goes to show, I think, just how obviously therapy works. So I'm going to give her credit for that piece. But on the flip side, which is related to this video, is that she was basically trying to interpret, because psychoanalyst, what she is, the psychoanalyst, she tried to analyze me and kind of interpret the situation to say, Oh, so you want a man who's going to take care of you in exchange for your freedom. I'm like, what? No, listen. I think part of what she said has some truth to it, right? But at the same time, I think the way she said it, because she said it kind of like, she said it with conviction. So I was like, hold up. I did kind of get defensive. I was like, no. I was like, nah, son. Like, I don't need nobody to take care of me in that respect. I can take care of myself. But it's the way she framed it, as if like, oh, I need a man to take care of me and I'm going to give up my freedom. This is like, no, that's not what it is. Because I did feel comfortable talking to her about my interest in BDSM. And that was her kind of interpretation. And she said that with conviction. I was just like, whoa. I feel like she was trying to heal me in a way. And it did kind of turn me off. It kind of made me feel discouraged from engaging in this lifestyle or whatever, or pursuing a guy, in his lifestyle. But then again, like, after some thought, I put a lot of thought to it. I was just like, listen, that I am who I am, and that's not going to change. And, I think that's the reason why I'm single, because I just have that unending desire to be with a man who gets it, and doesn't see it in a negative way. Because even when I talked about this before in like videos, some of the comments be like, oh, you a gold digger, you just want to be with a man so he can take care of you and you want him for his money. And I'm just like, what? Y'all don't get it. It just goes over people's head. I think this is the thing. People in the lifestyle of BDSM get it, and definitely submissives who are baby girls understand. They know why. It's about knowing that a man is gonna take care of you. That whole providing, that's a turn on. Certain things just turn a woman on. It draws her closer to him. Being that provider, being that person who sets those rules, like my former master did. It communicates a message of, I care about you. He's not doing it from a selfish desire, right? It wasn't for him. I mean, maybe partly because he probably got off on it too. That's the reason why we fit together like a glove, right? It's like a seesaw. It goes together. Where, part of it was probably reinforcing to him too, to see that I followed the rules. But at the same time, I think in me breaking the rules, or his rules, or agreed upon rules or contract, that I actually signed a contract with him too. This shit go deep. I think like it gave him a sense of power, right, and control. It kind of reinforced his dominance, but he was just dominant regardless if I followed what he told me to do, because that's just who he was. Like, you can tell a dominant man. Not only that, I did like that he also mastered in psychology. I think he had a master's degree in psychology. He worked in the field too of mental health, so it's just like he understood the human mind and behavior. That goes a long way, because you got, like I said, a lot of men be trying to dibble dabble in this. That's why I'll be telling people that shit too much, like, about my interest in BDSM, especially on the dating scene, because they take it and they just misconstrue it. They misinterpret it. They don't get it. And they think calling a woman bitch, like that's their way of being dominant. It's like, no. I don't like that. Baby girls don't like that. Now, granted, there are some submissives. There's a variety of submissives, right? It's a rainbow of different types of submissives in this lifestyle. And yeah, there are some submissives that they get off on being mistreated, being put down and belittled in a very berated way. Not I, though. I like being nurtured and pampered, in a sense, like taken care of like a baby girl, right? But I also like being disciplined too. And I like a man that sets the structure and takes the lead. And that is so difficult for men. And I often get asked the question, why are you single? And it's just like, listen, to even go and talk about that. Like, that's a whole long ass story. Men just don't get it. Even if I was to explain, men just don't get it. They don't. Either you get it as a dominant man or you don't. A lot of men in today's society just, you're not dominant. You know, you're watered down masculine men. And that's not what I'm attracted to. Men be sitting up here scrambling over who's going to pay for the first date. That to me doesn't give me a sense of security. That you got shit together, that I can follow your lead. It's a different dynamic when a woman has to pull out her purse. You know? Not that I can, but it just creates a different dynamic that I'm not really attuned to. I can do that. I can even be the dominant one. I've done that before in relationships where I had a guy that I dated for 5 years. He's my best friend now. And his whole paycheck went to my bank account. So I can be that way too, but do I prefer that way? No, absolutely no. I prefer to be a submissive. I prefer to be taken care of. I like to be spanked. But that only comes in the context of a truly dominant, submissive relationship. And like I was saying, a lot of men just don't get it. They don't know how to be dominant. Dominance is a natural thing. Either you have it or you don't. You can't teach a man how to be dominant, right? And they be wanting me to, like, teach them, like, oh, tell me about BDSM. Put me up on game. I'm just like, listen, I can give you a little history lesson and give you some education on what it is, but for me to tell you this is what you should do, like, no, that's a turnoff. That's taken away from the dynamic. Because dominant men, they are the one that sets the rules. They are the one that takes the lead. If I'm telling you how to take the lead, then I'm pretty much taking the lead in that relationship. I'm putting you up on game when the opposite should take place. Because masters, truly dominant men, I'm talking about masters at this shit, right? Like, they are so advanced that a woman barely can even see that he's, like, he barely can see what he's doing. He does it so nuancedly, right? It's just so nuanced that it's just like, damn. A woman is wow. Like, that's why I know when I'm around a true dominant man or a master, because it's like, whew. You just like, it almost feels like he outsmarts me, right? Because I'm a very intelligent woman, very smart woman. It's just like, whew, he's up on game, you know. And it does take, I think, for a man to really be committed. Because you got men, y'all ain't focused. Y'all trying to do this. You got this woman, that woman. Your attention span is like this big. It's very small. When it comes to being a master and being a dominant man, like, it takes time. I don't think people get that. Like, you have to be focused and disciplined. It takes time and effort, energy. Because what's really happening is that you're training. You're training. It's just like having, I don't want to say a dog, right? But I think, because women, of course, submissives, we're not dogs, but I'm just saying, like, if you're training a dog, because I know a lot of people have dogs, right? Like, it's consistency. Even the same thing with a child, right? You're training a child. It's consistency. It takes time. You can't just be like drunk and drinking and freaking smoking or stressed the fuck out all the time from your job. How can you train a person if you ain't got yourself together, right? Like, your emotions are dysregulated. It's just not going to happen. She's not going to listen to you. She can't take you seriously. She can't feel safe enough to submit, to follow your lead, because you're not together. And that's just what happens. But a master who is together, who is strong, who is disciplined, That's what I'm saying. Like, it's a lot involved. So that's why I'm single. Guys ask, like, why are you single? Listen, it takes a very special man to woo me. It does. Now, I've dated. I like different men, different caliber. I have fun, you know. So of course I like to go on dates and stuff. But I have yet to meet that man. But those BDSM spankings, yo. Them Jones be here. Y'all gotta go back and watch my other video because I did make a video, like I said, at the beginning of this video. I think it was back in 2017. It had to be like 2017, in the year of 2017, 2018, that academic school year, because that's when I was at my first practicum. And I remember I would I made a lot of videos when I was working my first practicum, so you guys gotta go check that out. But I think that video also went viral. But yes, yo, I can go on and talking about this, but I hope that I was able to shed some light on this dynamic within BDSM, right? This alternative lifestyle that many people still haven't come to terms with, just will never quite really be able to understand, and that's fine. That's fine, I guess, for you, but I think sometimes for me, I do get frustrated because it's just like, who wants to be misunderstood? But I think there's something mystical, there's something special about not being quite fully understood too. So I think it's something mystical, special about a person not being quite be able to put their finger on you, right? Not quite be able to figure you out, but then at the same time, it can be annoying when people misinterpret what you're saying. So on that note, I will end here. I want you guys to leave your comments below. As always, share your thoughts. Share your experiences. If you are a sub or dom, if you have experience in this lifestyle, you're a daddy dom. We call the dom who basically trains the baby girl, right? Who nurtures the baby girl, daddy dom. Daddy dom / baby girl. There's many different dynamics. Master, there are pets. You got people walk around New York City on all fours. But listen, this is a lifestyle. This is what we like, you know. And you can't group all of us in the same category because we're different. So a pet as a submissive is different than a baby girl, right? So don't get us confused. But I enjoyed this topic, and who knows when I'll come back. It all depends on, I guess, the comments. It all depends on the interaction on the video. If you guys want to make another video on this, feel free to let me know. Let me know what questions you have. I'm more than welcome to address those questions, and I will catch you guys later.